Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So, in this week's Parsha, we meet one of the Torah's most surprising character, a talking donkey. I promised, I said I would talk about it later. So, we have this donkey. Up until now, Balaam, the non-Israelite prophet, is on a journey to curse the Israelites at the behest of King Balak. Along the way, his donkey sees a divine messenger blocking the road, an angel with a drawn sword, and swerves aside to avoid it. Balaam, unable to perceive what the donkey sees, strikes her. Finally, the donkey turns to Balaam and says, "What have I done to you that you've struck me 3 times?" A talking donkey, really. This sounds ridiculous, right? Okay, and it is kind of ridiculous, and I think that's part of the point, that it's one of the Torah's most powerful examples of deep reversal. The prophet cannot see the angel, but the animal does. The one who is supposed to speak with divine insight it must be corrected or informed by a creature that many would presume to be voiceless or lowly. And so, why? How? Missing the point. The prophets missed the point. And so I think about this. When I think about this archetype, this character, we see it in Torah, and as I joked last night, we see it in a whole bunch of other places. And I think of this. This is the week of the Torah that you can tell we went on summer break and we needed to get some kind of summer blockbuster to get people back in the doors. But there are so many. It's not just in Torah. There are this reversal of voice, of wisdom, of vision, echoes across literature, ancient myth, and yes, even popular films. So the donkey, just think about the character of a donkey in so much of our literature, especially its role is humble, it's underestimated, but sometimes it does appear as a spiritually or morally insightful figure. So one example, going much more classically, Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. Sancho Panza rides a donkey and serves as the earthy, practical counterbalance to Don Quixote's lofty and delusional ideals. The donkey here is associated with humility, common sense, grounded wisdom, which is not too much unlike the Torah's donkey, who sees more clearly than the prophet. Let's go. Let's move from Spain to England. I'm going to call literature. We're going to talk about Eeyore. Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. We've got Eeyore, the melancholic donkey, who's often overlooked and misunderstood. But if you read carefully, Eeyore is the one who offers emotional depth and surprising insight within sort of the light-hearted world of the 100-Acre Wood. Other traditions, you look at Aesop's fables. That there's a donkey in many of them, and 2 in particular, you have what's called the ass and the lion's skin, a donkey where a donkey disguises itself but is revealed by its braying, so it could be read as a commentary on pretense versus truth, or the wolf in sheep's clothing in a sense. There's another one that's the ass in his shadow, which highlights disputes over trivialities. So either way, these stories cast the donkey as a figure of folly and pretension, but it's also a warning not to misjudge based on appearances. So that also resonates a bit with our parsha this week too. My least favorite story, of course, is the one with Pinocchio, because the 1940 movie still gives me nightmares as a small child. But we can't talk about rest of literature from across the world without talking about Pinocchio, because in that story, the boys who behave badly are turned into donkeys. So, which is its own symbolism of regression into animalistic foolishness. We get this also. That's a common theme in literature. Later on, I think of like Lord of the Flies. Also did not like that book. We can talk about that later. But more importantly, Pinocchio still is a cautionary tale that also implies that the donkey symbolizes a loss of moral and spiritual clarity which is an interesting reversal of everything else we've seen so far, where we have this trope of the donkey, the one that we assume knows nothing, is actually the wisest one. But then we get to some of my favorite examples, and the ones I joked about last night. I said last night that if I knew how to do it, I would have found some melody in Mendelssohn's A Midsummer's Night Dream to bring into services. I could not do that. I did not. That's a little bit beyond even my exploration of the Nusach. But we've got all over in Shakespeare. We have the fools and the tricksters. We have the wise fool in King Lear and Feste in Twelfth Night. And then we get to, of course, A Midsummer's Night Dream. So in Shakespeare's Midsummer's Night Dream, we have the foolish weaver named Bottom, who is given the head of a donkey by the mischievous Puck. Under a fairy enchantment, the regal and magical Titania falls in love with him. The scene is absurd, comedic, and yet, strangely sweet. Bottom, a fool in form and function, becomes the recipient of unexpected love. Though he has the head of an ass, the world around him begins to change. Love appears where it shouldn't. Reality's bending. And when the spell lifts, he reflects, "It shall be called Bottom's dream, because it hath no bottom." Shakespeare was very aware of all of the double entendres that definitely can exist in here. And one of the things that I have always thought of, when I was studying this part this week, and I kept thinking to myself, there has to be more here. There has to be more about, the etymology of the words here, there, and everywhere. The fact that the character who is the donkey is called Bottom, fill in the blanks. This is Shabbat morning. That's an after-dinner conversation. But I'm sure to share my etymological research on that. But there's also one other very big idea here. So like Balaam's donkey, Bottom becomes a vessel of divine absurdity, challenging our expectations about who is worthy of being seen, being loved, and also being listened to. Taking this even further, there's another modern fairy tale called Shrek. A gruff ogre just wants to be left alone in his swamp. Hope we all know we're on the same page here. And then we enter Donkey, who is loud, needy, ridiculous, loyal, but also wise. Though Shrek resists this companionship, it is Donkey who ultimately teaches him how to connect, how to be vulnerable, and how to love. Donkey speaks constantly, often to the annoyance of others. Sorry, I do that too, right now. But it is his persistent, unapologetic presence that transforms the hero. When it comes to the comic, humble, ridiculous voices, these are all being shown to us indirectly that these are sometimes the voices of wisdom. From Torah to Shakespeare to ancient fairy tales, modern fairy tales, these stories are challenging us to listen more deeply, especially to voices that we might otherwise be tempted to dismiss. All of these donkeys represent voices from the margins, the comic, the animal, absurd, and again, yet they are the ones who speak and see truly and so clearly. These stories remind us that wisdom often arrives dressed in foolishness. The sacred sometimes speaks with a bray. How often in our lives do we strike what we do not understand? Like Balaam. How often do we dismiss the voices that sound different or that come from unexpected places? What would it mean in this time, if we stopped, if we just listened to the donkey in our community, our families, even in ourselves? What might we hear if we allowed our own foolishness, our own vulnerability to speak? The miracle here in Balak is not just a donkey's talking. The miracle is that someone finally listens. This week, we may attune our ears to the quiet, the comic, the seemingly absurd, But I urge you all to listen and look for truth in unexpected places. And may we have the courage to let even the lowliest, the quietest, the silliest voices open up our eyes. Shabbat shalom.